Composers, do you ever feel like you have to just keep learning more and more before you feel ready to take on composing work? Or maybe you're taking on project after project, but your music still feels stuck and that little sense of burnout starts to creep in. In this video, we're going to go over one of the biggest mistakes that's holding you back and how you can finally start making progress in your composing career. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of my Clarity Session students, and he was saying how sometimes he feels like he gets so caught up in learning and trying to take in information that it's almost stopping him from feeling ready and feeling like he can take on work. I think part of us really wants to feel comfortable in proving that we know what we're doing, that we know the techniques out there to apply to our music. And then on the other end, there are people who have no problem taking action. They'll take on project after project, but these are the people that also probably feel burnt out. They don't feel like they're necessarily reaching goals, or there's some sort of misalignment. And that got me thinking about a concept that I like to call the composer tightrope. All right, so if we were to think of somebody walking a tightrope, right? We have the rope, we have the person who is walking it and trying to balance it, and then we have typically they carry some sort of beam to help them balance, right? On one end of the beam, let's say this is the left side, we're gonna have basically everything that is learning, anything that is taking in knowledge, studying, listening to podcasts, YouTube videos. So this side will be called learning. And this could be like, YouTube, maybe you're taking a class, maybe you're reading, textbooks like podcasts and whatnot. Maybe you're listening to a ton of interviews and seeing how other composers get their work done, and you want to try and apply these to your own workflow. But the problem with this method is that, especially in 2024, we have access to everything. All of the knowledge that we could possibly need is readily available to us, whether it be through like a podcast or a video or a class or a course or a mentor. We are always going to be looking for ways to get better. A lot of times we're going to create a trap for ourselves where we just enter this endless cycle of thinking we need to learn just one more thing before we can actually apply what we're learning, before we can get our music out there, before we can start networking. And this is probably going to lead us to something like analysis paralysis. And that's basically where we just have an overload of information that it's just gonna actually stop us from making any kind of progress at all. And that also leads us to this false sense of progress. A lot of times, if we fill up our calendar with like, okay, well, I studied a lot, I tinkered with my workflow a lot, or my template, I listened to this interview and I'm gonna apply those techniques into my work. But we do this every day, we do this week after week and month after month. How much of what you're taking in is actually sticking versus what's going in one ear and out the other? And when we have this false sense of progress, we're literally not making any progress. And so that makes it easy for us to feel like we're not doing a good job, we're not good at what we do, we're not making progress or hitting our goals. And this is something that I think I personally struggle with. I love to learn. Education is such an important aspect of my life as a composer, as an educator, obviously. So when it comes to me personally, I find myself being a perfectionist. I find myself struggling to take action. So I know that this is definitely something that I struggle with and will continue to work on. Now, if we were to look at side number two, if one side is all about learning, then the other is all about taking action, or, taking action on creating, writing music, doing the things. Maybe this actually includes taking on projects. Maybe this means you are networking. Maybe this means that you are writing music. Maybe this also means that you are marketing yourself. So we start to see how the music also starts leaning into not the business side of things, but more just like the logistic stuff. How do you actually start reaching out to people? How do you find clients? If a job offer comes for a regular composing gig for a podcast show, I'm referencing a ton of podcasts this video, or maybe like a YouTube series. Are you going to be the regular composer? What is your immediate answer? Are you saying yes? Now, actually, taking action, this ideally looks like the better side, maybe not better, but this looks like the more appealing side. Like, you are getting the work if you want to get paid for your music. It looks like you are putting in the effort, compared to learning, which is very internal. It's very mental. And I think there's a lot to be said about taking in information and actually reflecting on what you're learning about and making developmental progress personally or in your career. But I think the buzzwords when it comes to composing work is all about projects and gigs and finding work, networking, collaborating with directors and whatnot. But the problem is, once we keep saying yes to any project that comes our way, the work might start feeling repetitive. We might lose interest in why we like composing in the first place. And that is exactly what leads to burnout. You know, you're doing all the things that you think you should be doing, but they don't really line up with what you want. So you start feeling maybe a little resentment towards different projects. Maybe you start feeling just exhausted. And that is where action can lead to a bit of a pitfall. Whereas learning you almost like save yourself from the burnout. You create burnout in another way, but you save yourself from failing, from taking action, but because you think you're doing so much and you're learning so much and you're applying so much, whereas action, you're doing all the things correctly, but it's still not exactly what you want. Now, I am not someone who is remotely good at walking a tightrope, but I did a quick Google search, and one of the keys to finding balance on a tightrope is actually focusing on your core. And that's actually true for a lot of like yoga, meditation, workout things. So that's actually not a surprise. But what I found with a lot of composers is that they're either leaning one way versus another. On both ends, from learning to actually taking action, it does feel like we are being productive, but we have to take a step back and look, are the actions and steps that we're taking leading us to true progress towards our music goals? And we have to remember that true progress comes from a synergy between learning and taking action, right? Basically, learning informs your action, and that action provides real-world feedback that can enhance your learning. So if we were to apply that to our composer tightrope, when we actually have some sort of balance right in the middle, right? You don't really have to worry about falling off the rope, because things that are important to you and things that actually matter are keeping you balanced. And remember, if we're always focusing on our core, so let's say this is the core, right? And let's say this is a real close-up, right? So this is maybe the top of our head. This is us, our body. Maybe we're actually holding on to this little ball, our core, right? Maybe this is us, and maybe these are our legs. And we're on the tightrope that's underneath. Now, the question is, how do we know what to balance? How do we know what should be at our core? And that's what's really hard, because I could go on and on about, learning versus action. And the simple answer is to just go right down the middle, find balance. But there just has to be something deeper than that. So let's figure out how you can actually figure out your core. And as someone who is a constant learner, I have actually been learning a lot about Simon Sinek and his framework for actually discovering your why. Basically, there's this concept called the golden circle. The circle consists of basically your what is on the outside. I should have done this a little bit easier. Your how is in the middle, and your why is right in the center, right at the core. So do you see how we're starting to put this together? Right, let's say this is the balance beam itself, the thing that we're holding. On one side is action, this side is learn. Okay, hopefully that's starting to come together a little bit. So the golden circle, basically your why is your core motivation that drives every single thing that you do as a composer. He says that your why is who you are and that fundamentally your why doesn't really change. So I think that as composers, as musicians, it's our composer strengths that help us define and act on our why. And more often than not, we always start with what. And then sometimes we acknowledge our how, but rarely do we ever start with why. Rarely do we ever look into ourselves and see, okay, this is why I do the things that I do, and then allow that to expand outward to the how, and then expand outward to the what. So if we were to frame this as a composer, maybe the what is gonna be our, we create music. These are our projects, right? This is the thing that we do or offer for somebody else. So I'm a composer, I do this. And that's very base level. Then we have our how. And this is gonna be maybe the method. This is gonna be the process. This is gonna be maybe specifically who we help. So method, process, who we help, and please forgive my poor handwriting. And then for the sake of continuity, let's just get rid of our rope for a second and let's go for the why. And remember, the why is the core motivation behind the work. The reason why you compose. But even deeper than that, maybe there's a story, right? Or past experience. But the thing is, finding your why isn't always going to be easy. It might not just show itself to us. We might actually have to think and dig deep and really figure out why it is we do what we do. And that's why I think that composer strengths really help you define that why. Maybe your strength is all about impact and you really care about making some sort of lasting impression. Maybe you really want to make sure that you can inspire somebody else. And that can help you define that why. Or maybe your strength is collaboration and you care just so much about a team setting, coming together and creating something that is larger than yourself, right? You love the connection that you get from working with others because you're all putting in something that you're uniquely good at towards a larger goal. Now, composer strengths is something that I've been working on year round, and it's just a passion project that I absolutely love putting together. So if you're interested in discovering your own strengths, then definitely check out my Composer Strengths Explorer. This is a free assessment that I put together specifically for composers who need help just determining what their strengths are, what they're inherently good at. This way you have a better understanding of your why and a path forward to actually live the music career that you want to live. So again, it's absolutely free. I left a link in the description down below. So let's say you now know your composer strength. That's going to inform your why. It's going to help you make better decisions on when you should focus on learning versus when you should actually take action. So let's say that my personal composer strength is my passion, right? It could be for the music, it could be for my career itself, it could be in education, it could be in teaching. My passion is my overall strength, which means that maybe my why is finding a sense of fulfillment, right, through music education. Your core strengths are what's going to guide you in prioritizing what's most important for your growth. If I know that my passion and maybe another strength of mine is collaboration, right? That's going to extend outward into how I do what I do and into what I do. My passion for the music, my passion for education, skills in communication, these are all central to who I am, and that's not gonna change. Take a look back, right? If we were to go back to our main tightrope walking composer, if we don't have a why, if we don't have the thing that's balancing us, our core, then we're gonna fill up either side with a ton of either information or a ton of work that may or may not be leading us to our actual goals. So by having and starting with why, starting with the thing that you're naturally good at, the thing that informs your music career, that leads out to, okay, I want to work on the projects that mean something to me. I'm passionate about the music. I care about fulfillment. I care about working in a team setting where they actually value my input. If we look at this close-up of the tightrope walker, everything that matters is at the core. All that extra stuff, so like learning and then taking action, these are things that we can do. And like I said, there's a synergy between the two, but at least we're doing it in service of the why itself, the strength that we're actually good at. Now, I just want to go over some strategies that can help you find that balance. Now, the first one's going to be all about setting priorities based on your composer's strengths, right? So set priorities based on strengths. This is all about making sure that the things that you're actively doing now, the projects that you're taking on, the books that you're reading, or the videos that you're watching, the podcasts that you're listening to, they are in service of your why. This means you're making some sort of conscious decision to take in the stuff that matters, right? Keep it at our core and allow the other stuff, the excess, to exist on the outside. That's who you are. You know who you are. You know the things that you are excited about when it comes to different projects that you're taking on. If you're learning, you're maybe listening to interviews from people that are similar to you in that sense. So keep that at the center, and then all the outside stuff, maybe you can say no to. As a collaborator, as someone that gets excited by those kinds of things, that's a very different feeling compared to if you are working completely by yourself. No one is really listening to your input. Maybe the director or whoever you're working with is just extremely difficult to communicate with, but maybe you're just taking on project after project because you need the money. Money is valid. Money, we all need the money, but what are the steps that you're taking today to prioritize based on what you're naturally good at, the things that you genuinely love to do? Now, strategy number 2, this is going to be all about a routine that balances, right, learning versus action. Remember, finding a balance starts with our why and it extends outwards. So instead of doing all the things at once and trying to balance between the two, what are the projects that you definitely want to take on because they lean into your strengths? Who are the people that you know will help you push your career in a positive direction, in the direction that aligns with your goals? Are you taking any and every course or watching every single YouTube video about mixing techniques and the right EQ to use and learning all these things that sure are important, but do they actually help you achieve those goals? And once you kind of know the bits that you want to take, so the books you want to read, the scores you want to study, or, the people you want to reach out to, the type of projects that you're interested in, then you can balance those out instead of balancing everything. So like I said, learning is going to inform your action. I learn the thing and then I apply it into whatever project I'm working on. And then the action informs your learning because you get to reflect, you get to see what worked, what didn't work, and implement that into your learning process, the lessons learned. And one of the best things that you can do is actually plan out when you want to learn and when you want to create. Maybe for an hour each day, you focus on one thing that you know is actually going to move the needle for you. Let's say that Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are all about taking action. So maybe you're writing your music, you're reaching out to people, you're marketing yourself, you're doing all the things that have to get done, the actionable things that have to get done, and you still feel like you're creating in a way that leads to your end goal. And then maybe on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and even a Saturday, you can do the things for you. You are learning because it's fun. Maybe you're studying something new because it, again, moves the needle in the right direction. And setting aside these days that are specific to one thing or another, it helps with consistency, but it also helps you balance out between the two. And then strategy number 3 is all about reflection and then adjustment. This is when you take the time to step back and reflect on the actual progress that you've made. If we look back at our tightrope, are you overemphasizing one side versus another? And you want to make sure that you're not just reflecting on the tasks that you've done or the projects that you've done or the books that you've read. It's also about reflecting on your why. It's also about reflecting on if your values have changed, and if so, why have they done that? But you just want to make sure that you're not rigid in your approach, right? Just because you have an end goal doesn't mean you have to limit yourself, limit your creativity, or limit what it is you want to do. But it's okay to reflect back and then adjust accordingly. And a really useful thing that you can do is start journaling. If you just brain dump all of your thoughts onto a piece of paper, or if you have a tablet, you'll start to notice trends in yourself that you wouldn't have picked up on if you were just, cycling through your own head. Literally this past week, I started journaling just because I want to make sure I'm doing the things that are aligned with my career as a composer, my career as an educator, the content that I create on YouTube. And just in the past few days alone, I feel like I've gotten a ton of clarity just from jotting down my thoughts to paper. So if you were to just draw out your own composer tightrope, how well are you balancing between learning, taking in information, reflecting, versus taking action, reaching out to people, working on different projects and writing music? Ideally, you're taking the steps now, today, to do the things that actually align with you. So don't forget that you can discover your own strengths with that composer strengths assessment that I mentioned, linked down below. So let's say you've discovered your strengths, you figured out your why, but you're struggling to stand out in the music industry. Then you might want to check out this video here. It's all about the composer formula that I use that allows me to connect on a deeper level with my target audience. So I'll see you over there, and as always, happy composing.